So I focus on how, as we are reaping the benefits of emerging technologies in general, but perhaps most specifically on artificial intelligence these days, how we're going to mitigate the risks, the potential harms, and the undesirable societal consequences. And there are many ways, there are many mechanisms we can turn to. Some are based in ethics, some are based in engineering, some are based in governance, some are based in these new approaches for the oversight of technologies. But there's also a broader issue at stake, which is what kind of a world are we creating, for whom, and who gets a say in the shaping of that future? Or are we all just inevitably going to be committed to whatever world becomes possible based on the new technologies that we develop, or the new technologies that serve the business interests that deploy them? So it's also questions about meaning in life, questions about multi-stakeholder participation, questions about how best to shape a world that we want to bequeath our children and grandchildren. So it's a conversation that has many different elements to it, and the different elements also entail a lot of what I call silo busting, because most of the people in this research and field, they have relatively narrow goals and concerns. Those operate around their occupations or their desires, and it's hard for us to break out of those more solid ways of looking and be open to the perspectives of others and understand the perspective of others and find ways of working cooperatively toward shared results rather than just the individual aspirations or needs or profitability of individual groups or corporations. Well, it's not just that I'm proposing a new governance structure. I think it's clear to anyone who looks closely that existing governmental structures do not work very well when you deal with emerging technologies. There are too many applications coming along too quickly. Legislators and executive branches of governments, they're not in a position of evaluating the issues in every single one of them. If they put in place regulations or too many laws, there gets to be a rebellion. So we need a new approach, and people have talked often about the need for agile governance. This gives us an opportunity to see if we can be creative in terms of what would actually constitute agile governance. Now, I use the governance word, not the government word. So by governance, I mean being able to draw on a vast variety of mechanisms to address the various challenges that arise. When I think of governance, both nationally and internationally, I think about putting in place good faith brokers who are able to convene multi-stakeholder forums, who are able to monitor comprehensively developments in a field and flag when there are gaps or concerns that are not being addressed, and then look at the array of mechanisms, at a broad array of mechanisms to see how best to address those gaps. So some of those mechanisms may be technological. They may be really what is talked about as AI safety or addressing transparency and bias in AI algorithms. There may be technological solutions that imply that we can develop totally new applications that can meet needs of individual groups or needs of the society in general. We may be actually able to design values into the technologies themselves, or design sensitivity to values in the technologies themselves that they factor into the choices and actions they make. What is sometimes called as value alignment in AI has generally been called machine ethics or moral machines outside of the AI realm. But there are other levels of governance. There's corporate oversight, and there's corporations truly being responsible through AI ethics technology review boards or AI ethics officers. There are soft governance mechanisms which include industry standards, laboratory practices and procedures, insurance policies. So there are so many different mechanisms that can be brought to bear. And my sense of agile governance is you look to the mechanisms other than hard law and hard governance, and you look to hard law and hard governance as a last resort. But as a last resort, you may still need it to be able to enforce these softer mechanisms. You may need it as a way of punishing those who violate what have become the accepted standards. So what I've been proposing most recently is that we convene a global governance congress for AI and try and set up a new body, or at least the first steps in setting up a new body that could engage in this comprehensive oversight of the field. I suspect that new body will be a new form of civil society or NGO, but it could be deeply associated with other international institutions, whether that's the UN or the IEEE or the International Committee of the Red Cross, the World Economic Forum. There are many other institutions that I hope would support this body, and it may actually be more tightly affiliated with those bodies than other independent forms of civil society are. So the idea is we would convene a global Congress, that we would try and get most of the stakeholders in place, which means not only the states, but also the leading corporations, and also significant representatives of civil society. And in addition, I think we would need to have academic research institutions represented there, so that we're moving beyond the traditional state model of governance. There's a lot of ideas out there that we hope to draw upon. Some ideas we already have about the direction we'd like to move to, but there are many issues to resolve long before you could put an effective body in place.